Hello, and welcome to another episode of Color Commentary. My name is Glenn Whitmore, and I am a 35-year plus veteran of the comic book industry. And in this series, I review and reminisce about an old comic that I colored. And this series is sponsored by Catskill Comics. For all your original and commission art needs, contact Scott at catskillcomics.com. Scott is my representative, and you can find a lot of my sketches on his site available for great prices right now. So, just to show you kind of what I do here, here's some recent sketches I did that I will be sending to Scott so he can post on his site. But these are not on the site right now, but I will be sending them to him. So here's a whole bunch of them, and as you see, I do a lot of golden age, silver age looking kind of work, and so anyhow, there you go. So on with the color commentary. And I say that this is a series where I review old comics that I colored. But today I thought I would review a comic that I recently colored, which is The Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Special. I colored 3 of the 10-page backstories in this. I was invited by editor Brittany Holzer, who graciously extended an invitation for me to reunite with such talents as John Bogdanov, Butch Guice, and Tom Grummett, and Doug Hazelwood, and Jerry Ordway, Louise Simonson, Roger Stern. And it was a lot of fun. I did not color the lead story, which was colored by Brad Anderson, and it was written and drawn by Dan Jurgens and Brett Breeding, and Brett inked it. So anyway, but we'll get to that. I'm also going to touch on this as well. But so obviously this is the first time I really colored a Superman Triangle era Superman since the 90s, and when I did them, I did color guides, and here I just did digital. And I learned a lot since learning digital. I've learned a lot about color, and I've learned a lot about how to do better color, about better lighting, modeling. And so the first story here is by Tom Grummett. And I learned many tricks. Back in the day, I didn't know how all these digital effects were being done. And but recently, this past year, when I was doing this story, I was doing things like doing an effect for that television screen, and so. Let me just set my timer here. Well, anyway. So, there you go. I was doing the this dot sort of RGB dot screen effect for the television, and then pasting it back into the working dock. But there were things that I was doing with this that I wasn't doing back then in the day, like all this, this lighting and this shading. I was able to control that. Sometimes I would do that in the color guide back in the day, and maybe the separator didn't quite model it exactly the way I had intended. But it was fun. A lot of these pages here are the color palette for the most part is still a very bright kind of 90s-ish color palette. These were fun pages to work with. Um, there are these there are these newspaper clippings here, and of course, newspaper. A lot of newspaper photos are just black and white photos, especially back then in the '90s. So I would do a grayscale. I would color them in grayscale, do a dot screen effect, paste it back in, but just paste it in on the black channel, and then the black would go over the color that I had colored the background of the newspaper. So I would do stuff like that. Um, so, and of course, my Superman is very bright and very primary and really pops out. So, and so this was a fun book. This was a fun project to be included on, and I can only imagine Brittany's sort of reticence to use me, since I was only the colors back in the day. I might not necessarily have the chops to do to color a modern comic book at DC, but I think in the end she was pleased and satisfied, and so were the other artists that I colored. Um, but it does have a brighter, more of a 1990s feel to the stories, which worked in its favor because the stories took place in the '90s when Superman had in fact died. So anyway, here's Butch Guice's story, and it focused on the Guardian. And I back in the day, he was like the hardest to color for some reason. But for this, some reason, he was with my digital skill training. He was easier to color, so I had fun with that. And I would do so. Like his file that he sent, his black and white file, had this explosion in grayscale. So basically it was a tonal rendering of an explosion, and that was very difficult to do. So what I did was just put color under it. So what I did was I isolated this. I created a document which had this at this exact size, pasted it into a separate document, and I did I put it in duotone mode, and I chose a dark red, and then converted it to CMYK, pasted it back into the document, and erased the gray version of the explosion, and it looked great. So lots of nice explosive reds there. Everything's on fire, so I did these reddish backgrounds, and I heard back from these guys, and they said they were happy and pleased with it. So I'm happy that they were pleased with it as well. But it works. It's good, solid color. It's not dark and gritty. It's not really that dark and gritty like the lead story is, but still, this doing stuff like this, doing the Guardian in his dark versions of his colors, and being, having this bright yellowish color frame him, that's what I was trying to do. And they gave me reference on panels that I had colored 30 years previous, and I was using those as reference. I couldn't remember how I colored. I don't look at my old comic books all that much, except during this series. So, I was trying to color it in the spirit of the original comics, but make make it a little less harsh than it was in the 90s. I think colors in the 90s tended to be kind of too bright and too harsh. Here's a scene where they're in the morgue, where they've got Doomsday and Superman in the morgue, and I just decided to do a color temperature kind of thing where I did this eerie sort of clinical green light, everything lit, and then when this character Double X, who does this mental projection thing and communicates with the characters, back in the day, he was knocked out in that magenta purple color, and so he popped out against the green, the clinical green of the story. And then what I did was, here in this panel, everybody's sort of lit with this green color, but for the final panel, I decided to like do a different lighting scheme, lighting cue for the final panel, because it's just sort of like, okay, boom, here they are, sort of like, let's leave it on a brighter note, So, by the way, all these pinups here were really awesome. Great stuff. So anyway, the last is Bill Sienkiewicz. That's an awesome piece. So the last story was drawn by John Bogdanov, and John obviously was the co-creator of Steel, John Henry, and he probably had the most changes. He wanted me to darken John's skin a little bit. I made it maybe a little too bright, but I'm one who errs on the side of being too light rather than too dark, because I don't want things to be oversaturated. So, but anyway, I had to research these characters here, and I was, like there's this blue reflected light from his blue jeans on this character's side of his face, and John also got into this digital inking thing. I don't know why Dennis Janke was not involved. I don't know what the reason was, but John definitely crammed everything into all he could into everything. It was a very very intense story to color. It would take me nearly a day to color just one page. And I don't work with flatters, so I'm doing it all by myself. And the way I usually work is I go from background to foreground. So the background element gets colored first, then I do then I work forward. So anyway, this was quite a panel to color, because there was like a lot of these cars cracked up, and you wanted all the it's an important thing in the story, and you wanted the characters to pop out too. So when the artist throws a lot at you, that's where you're earning the big bucks. You're trying to make everything separate, but it was fun stuff to color, and just like the other two. And let's see. So, and I'm glad he told me to darken the skin tones on the characters here. These African American characters and whatnot, because actually it worked out, because there was this explosion later on in the story, and as you can tell, I did like this light yellowish color here. They're being lit by an explosion. So it helped emphasize the contrast between stuff that was normally going on and then this explosion. So, but anyway, and he loves drawing all these kid characters. He's great at it. You know, this perspective and the fire escapes and the buildings and the bricks. He really goes hog wild with it, and he's another one. And um, this is another thing. One of the things about digital inking, digital files that I get sometimes, is that uh, they will the artist will leave things in gray tones, which I'm kind of not used to that. I'm used to the traditional approach of everything's like convert is easily converted into a black and white line art rather than a tonal file. So anyway, and I did this thing here. You know, we're on like the ninth page of a 10-page story. So I did this thing where John Henry gets to Superman's death scene here a little too late, and there's that shock, and then it starts to wear off, and then he kind of gets angry, but then he gets sad, and then he's really down. And I simplified the color here, so I did this sort of color change in the background just to make these panels pop out and to emphasize the emotion of what he's going through. And then here's the final page, and I did a knockout of John Henry as Steel in the background. And then and I had to go in and I had to separate the steel image from the foreground image of John Henry. Yeah, I obviously in the 30 year actually it was really only 20 years of nearly 20 years of working digitally. I picked up a lot of knowledge, a lot of tricks that I could do to make it look good. Let's just move quickly to Brad Anderson's story color job on Jurgens and Breeding here, and a lot of his tones are they're not oversaturated, and this was quite an eye opener to get my comp copy here, and to look at what he did with the color. And I'm guessing he works with flatter, so but there's like a lot of richer tones here on the in this story. And the ink limit that I keep to is 240. Maybe really I could go 250, and maybe that would help. But like this classroom, it's a lot of neutrals, and the skin tones. The skin tones aren't straight, Y20, magenta 20. So I'm guessing a lot of his approach, there's a lot more, grayer and neutral, like the dark color and the darker tone in Superman's uniform here. That's deeper and richer, and the highlight color is not quite that bright cyan color that I was used to using back in the day, and that I used on here. So like if you compare my Superman tones that I used on Superman, the colors that I chose, against his are kind of a little more deeper and richer, and like, and he did take a lot more time to do a lot more rendering, and there's like a lot of side lighting here. He did a great job, and I could learn a lot from this. But whatever he's doing, it's working, and it's a really, and he did a job worthy of the story. So the story was quite an epic story. So and he a lot of knockouts, a lot of knocking out of the line work. It's a lot of work to do that, just to knock out the line art, and and he's, here's like a whitish, cooler light here, at times. At time, everything's double lit. Everything's different. Warm light source versus a cool light source or a white light source. Obviously, in the heat vision, that's going to be a warm light source. But then these blues here are very cool. So Brad did a really bang up, spectacular job, and so did Dan and Brett. So anyway, right now I'm going to let you go. I hope you enjoyed this color commentary. Once again, CatskillComics.com if you want to buy some original art, some of my original art for you. And I hope you had enjoyed this commentary, and we'll be back next time with another one. Thank you.